It was Christmas Eve, 1945, in Fayetteville, West Virginia. The home of George and Jenny Sodder was brimming with holiday cheer. Their 10 children, ranging from toddlers to teenagers, filled the house with laughter and excitement. As the evening wore on, the family sat down for their festive meal, savoring the warmth of the season. George and Jenny, having worked hard throughout the year, were grateful for the togetherness of their family. However, beneath the merriment, there was an unsettling sense of foreboding. Unknown to the Sodders, their Christmas would soon turn into one of the most perplexing mysteries in American history. As midnight struck, Jenny sent the younger children to bed, while the older ones stayed up to help clean up. She and George exchanged a few quiet words before deciding it was time to sleep. But what should have been a peaceful night would soon spiral into terror. Around 12:30 a.m., as Jenny stayed up to finish some tasks, she was suddenly jolted awake by an unusual sound. A loud thud echoed from the roof of their house, followed by what seemed like the sound of something rolling across the roof. At first, Jenny thought it might have been something innocent, a branch from a nearby tree or the wind causing a noise. But something about it felt wrong. Still, she brushed off the thought and continued with her chores. Little did she know, this strange noise would be the harbinger of tragedy. Around 1 a.m., Jenny was suddenly roused from sleep. The room was filled with smoke, and her eyes burned as she awoke with a start. In a panic, she rushed to the bedroom window and saw flames billowing from the roof. The fire had already begun to devour the upper floor, and within moments, the entire house seemed engulfed in flames. Jenny screamed for George, waking him from his slumber. He rushed out of the room to assess the situation, but the fire spread so rapidly, it seemed impossible to contain. It was a nightmare. The wooden house that had sheltered their family for years was crumbling under the heat. Jenny and George hurriedly gathered their youngest children, Sylvia and Joey, and made their way out of the house. They stood helpless in the cold, watching as the house burned. But what struck them as truly inexplicable was that their 5 older children were nowhere to be found. Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty were still missing. In desperation, George tried to rush back into the flames, but he was stopped by the intensity of the fire. The windows shattered as the heat consumed the walls. By the time the fire department arrived, it was too late. The entire structure had collapsed, reduced to ash. George and Jenny stared at the destruction in disbelief, struggling to comprehend how their children could have vanished from the house amidst the flames. As the fire was extinguished and the ruins of the Sodder home cooled, the investigation began. But the more the authorities looked into the fire, the more puzzling it became. There were no remains of the 5 children. It was an extraordinary detail that defied logic. If the fire had been hot enough to consume a wooden house in minutes, surely there should have been some traces, bone fragments, teeth, or other remains of the children. But there was nothing. The investigators were baffled. They concluded that the children must have perished in the fire, yet no physical evidence supported that theory. To make matters worse, George and Jenny received a disturbing message. An anonymous phone call claimed that their children were alive and safe, that they had been taken before the fire started. The call offered no explanation, but it planted a seed of doubt in George and Jenny's minds. They refused to believe that their children were dead. They began to search for answers themselves, conducting their own investigation, determined to uncover the truth. George hired private investigators, who dug into the family's history and began questioning locals. What they discovered next was unsettling. Rumors and strange details began to emerge. Some locals believed that the fire had been set intentionally. There were whispers that the house had been under surveillance before the fire. But why? What possible motive could there be to harm the Sodder children? The theories began to spin out of control, and soon the mystery deepened even further. In the weeks that followed the fire, George and Jenny's search for answers intensified. They encountered a string of strange leads that only deepened the mystery. Local rumors hinted at the involvement of outsiders. One theory suggested that the children had been abducted by a group of individuals who were familiar with the family. But why would anyone want to take 5 children from their home, especially on such a significant night? The answers seemed elusive. Then, a strange and baffling discovery was made. A charred section of the house, near the site of the fire's origin, showed signs of being untouched by flames. A fire that could devour an entire house in minutes somehow spared this one area, and no one could explain why. Could the fire have been deliberately set in a way that allowed for an escape? Did someone intend for the children to escape the inferno? Meanwhile, the search for the children intensified. Jenny was haunted by the feeling that her children were still out there. Posters with their pictures were plastered across the town and beyond. Leads came in from all corners of the country, but none led to the children. However, the most chilling lead came from a letter that arrived nearly a year after the fire. Inside was a photograph of a young woman who looked eerily similar to Jenny's daughter, Betty. The sender claimed to have seen her in a neighboring town, living under a different name. Was this a clue, or just another cruel hoax? The possibility that the children were alive and being held captive seemed more plausible now, but without proof, George and Jenny's hope began to wane. Despite the years that passed, the Sodder family never gave up on the mystery of their children's disappearance. The investigation continued for decades, with theories growing darker. Some believed the fire had been a cover-up for a kidnapping, an elaborate plot that began long before Christmas Eve. There were whispers of criminal connections, and some even suspected that George's business dealings might have been involved. Had he made enemies who sought revenge in the most sinister way possible? Other theories suggested that the fire was not the only crime that night, that the children had been taken, hidden away, and possibly trafficked. Yet, no one was ever found who could definitively answer those questions. No one could ever provide the family with the truth. The case went cold, but the haunting questions lingered in the hearts of the Sodders until their deaths. To this day, the mystery of the Sodder children's disappearance remains unsolved, one of the most confounding and chilling cases in American history. No one knows for sure what happened that Christmas Eve. Was it a tragic accident, a cruel crime, or something far more sinister? With no new evidence, the case continues to captivate the world's imagination, leaving behind a haunting legacy of unanswered questions. The case of the Sodder children's disappearance is not just a historical curiosity. It's a tragic enigma that has fascinated generations. As we look back on this mysterious case, we can't help but wonder, was the fire truly accidental, or was something more sinister at play? Were the children taken that night, or did they vanish into the unknown? No one will ever know for sure. But what we do know is that George and Jenny Sodder's search for answers never ended. The pain of losing their children and the mystery that followed haunted them until their deaths. In the absence of justice, the family's relentless pursuit of the truth became a testament to their love for their children. If you have any thoughts or insights about the Sodder children's disappearance, or if you're aware of any new information, we encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Perhaps, after all these years, someone will be able to shed light on what truly happened that night. Until then, we continue to search for answers because the truth deserves to be known. If you found this story gripping, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more captivating mysteries. Thanks for joining us on the Crypt Stories.